In 1998, Tom Brokaw wrote a very patriotic book titled The Greatest Generation. It described the lives of 49 Americans who shared three common experiences in life. They each grew up in the Great Depression, each fought for our country in World War II, and finally, each came home to become the very fabric of their community. John O. Campbell met those criteria, and although he didn't make the book's first edition, he does today. This bestseller book was inspired by Mr. Brokaw's coverage of the D-Day invasion in World War II. As he was observing the heroic veterans take the stage that day in Normandy, he was asked, what was he thinking? He simply responded, I think this was the greatest generation any society has ever produced. Later in the book, he went on to say, to the stories I couldn't get to, I'm genuinely sorry. I hope you will tell them in your own way. May I suggest to the families of the greatest generation, ask the questions and hear the stories that have been locked in memory for too long. After visiting Normandy the following year, I decided to ask the questions. Today, I'd like to share with you the 5 stories he shared that described his long and fruitful life. We agreed on 5 meaningful titles: The Saint, The Seers, The Souvenir, The Suit, and The Server. One of his guiding principles was this: remember the good things of life and repress the unpleasant. True to his word, you will soon hear that each of these stories has a very happy ending. Story 1. The Saint. John Ogden Campbell was born July 27, 1923, the only child of John Roy and Seda Bunch Campbell in Harrison, Arkansas. Nobody had any money back then, but they were better off than most. His first Christmas tree was an ironing board. His only present, a set of wooden blocks. As a 5-year-old child, he witnessed his mother being taken from the family home in an ambulance. She was transported to Springfield suffering from kidney stones. She died 2 days later. He vividly remembered his father coming home that evening. He scooped him up from bed and took him to the front room. He lit a lantern and tried to explain that it would just be those two from now on. John Ogden grew to rely on his father, to love him, and to have a healthy fear of him. Many tough and lonely months followed. One night at supper, his father had an announcement. John Ogden, this is never going to work out. It's time for us to make a change. On the weekends, our neighbor Mrs. Phillips will stay here with you. I'll be going into town and be home every Sunday night for supper. The heart of a 6-year-old child skipped a beat. He asked, why are you going to town? His father answered, so I can find you a mother and me a wife, and we could be a family again. Every Sunday afternoon, he would wait for his father to arrive. He had his slingshot and fired walnuts at everything that moved. When his father arrived, he always had the same questions. Why are you taking so long? Do you need any help? Several months passed. One beautiful spring Sunday afternoon, he heard that Model A Ford rumbling up the dirt road. The horn was honking and the lights were on. He had found her, and she said yes. They bear-hugged and danced and shed more than a few tears. Then the questions began. When can I meet her? What's she like? What's her name? You'll meet her soon, son. What's she like? Well, she's very pretty and real sweet. And she sings a lot. Her name is Dorothy Jo Walker, and she'll be a saint to us. Story 2. The Seers. Life got so much better for those Campbell men. At Christmas, that ironing board was replaced by a fresh evergreen tree with a star on top. Homemade cornbread and fresh preserves replaced dry toast and marmalade for supper. The Campbell parents noticed that John Ogden read very few books. The only book he enjoyed, the one he slept with at night, was the Sears and Roebuck catalog. One page was dog-eared, and his parents took notice. At the height of the Great Depression, on his 8th birthday, his parents made quite a financial sacrifice. His father came home with a big package from the Sears and Roebuck. John Ogden tore into the package and pulled out his presents: a basketball and a goal. He quickly filled it full of air, and his father hung the goal on the barn. As we all here know today, the basketball goal hung on that barn completely set the trajectory for John O. Campbell's life. Story 3. The Souvenir. This story was only fully told once in the past 20 years. As was the case with many World War II veterans, everything was remembered and little was repeated. At the age of 19, he answered the call of his country and joined the Army Air Corps. He became a radio operator in a C-47 plane stationed in France. Miraculously, he never saw a shot fired in anger. However, on April 5, 1945, he came face to face with the brutality of war. The Allies had won the Battle of the Bulge and were marching through Germany. The Nazis would surrender within 40 days. On the eve of April 5th, the wing commander for the C-47s gathered them together, and here's what he said. Men, we have troops scattered throughout Europe. It is our job to get them home. Our 44th Infantry has liberated a notorious prisoner of war camp near the town of Bad Orb, Germany. Among the many thousands held captive, there are several hundred that fought for General Patton in the Battle of the Bulge. Here are our direct orders, and they come from the very top. We will depart at 6 hours tomorrow and fly directly over the River Rhine. We will locate the town of Bad Orb and due southeast. We will find 27 buildings on a hill. This is Stalag 9B. Before reaching landing pattern, we will descend to a much lower altitude and generously tip our wings to the men below. This will show them their prayers have been answered, the Americans have arrived, and we're here to get you out. That's all. Wheels up at 6 hours. Now here it's helpful to understand a wonderful ritual of American prisoners of war in World War II. Occasionally, a care package from the American Red Cross would arrive. Inside the box would be small tins of food, maybe some corned beef or cheese, sometimes coffee. The men would tear the labels from the food tins and write their individual days of captivity on the back of the labels. This gave them hope and structure. They would share a small pencil confiscated from the Germans. It was sacredly called the camp pencil. The next morning, the C-47s arrived. They flew over the camp and flew so low that Airman Campbell said you could see the men's noses sticking through the fence. The first wave of men were brought onto the planes. They were in very bad shape. None of them weighed more than 90 pounds. Airman Campbell would give each man a canteen of fresh water and 2 crackers as he strapped them in. Because of their small size, he decided to double them up in a seat. Instead of getting 16 men out safely, he could get 32. On his way up to the aisle to the cockpit, one of the men put a small object in his hand. He said to Airman Campbell, "Thank you for rescuing us. Treasure this forever." Campbell opened his hand. It was the camp pencil. Story 4. The Suit. After 2 years and 9 months serving our country, he returned home. He hitchhiked from Harrison to Fayetteville and enrolled in the university under the GI Bill. Playing in an intramural basketball game, he was discovered by a Razorback basketball manager. The manager ran to the old field house right into Coach Lambert's office. "Coach, I found our point guard. He dribbles the ball about 6 inches off the ground, passes it like a wizard, and shoots his free throws granny style. We have all these tall players on the team, and he can get the ball to them, Coach. I'm telling you, he's our answer." Coach Lambert answered, "Son, you know how much I like tall players. I've been told we have the tallest lineup in the country, but we do need a playmaker. So you go get him and invite him for a tryout tomorrow." The manager reached the door when he was stopped. "Son, I have one more question. An important question. How tall is he?" "Coach, he's about 5'6". Everybody calls him Little Johnny Campbell." The coach mumbled, "There goes my tallest lineup." As they say, the rest is history. He made the team, started every game for 2 years, and led the Razorbacks to a SWC championship and the Final Four Western Championship tourney. His favorite memory was February 12, 1949. The Razorbacks were tied for first place, and they hosted none other than the Texas Longhorns. The stage was set. The old field house was filled by 5:30. The band started playing at 6. A horn player named Dale Bumpers led the charge. 25 years later, he would call on Johnny Campbell. Now this is an important part of the story. Every radio station in Arkansas carried the game. A fire truck salesman from Little Rock on the way to Fort Smith found a good signal and pulled over to listen to the game. He prayed his car battery would last. With a few minutes left, little Johnny Campbell made his first mistake. He picked up his dribble from 20 feet away. The Longhorns surrounded the tall Razorbacks inside. He was unguarded. The student section began to yell, "Score, Johnny, score! Shoot, Johnny, shoot!" He let it fly. Swish. Razorbacks beat Texas. Now here's where the story gets interesting. A few days later, he was in his apartment across from Old Main. He heard a car pull up out front. He looked out the window. A police car. City of Fayetteville. The next few minutes, a knock on the door. "Little Johnny Campbell, my police chief told me to find you and bring you downtown." The fog of fear set in. On the way downtown, he finally mustered up the courage to ask, "Officer, can you tell me why I'm being arrested?" The officer adjusted his rearview mirror to look directly at him. "Son, in Arkansas, we don't arrest our heroes who just beat Texas. You're going to the Campbell Bell department store. This is going to turn out just fine for you." As he walked into the store, he was met by the manager. "Johnny, this morning I got a call from a very prominent booster in Little Rock. He told me to get you in here and fix you up and send him the bill. Now you go over there to that suit rack and pick out a nice wool suit. Get a matching hat and I'll meet you in the shoe department." And here he is, wearing that fine suit. As he was walking down Dixon Street on the way home, he kept repeating the same thing over and over. "Johnny scores, Johnny scores, Johnny scores." A few follow-up questions were called for here. First question, did you think twice about accepting that free gift for beating Texas? I never thought once about it. First, it wasn't against the rules back then, but it probably wouldn't have mattered. I'd never owned a suit before. Okay, second question, did you ever find out the identity of that prominent booster in Little Rock? Was he a Stevens or even a Rockefeller? He smiled and said none. He was a fire truck salesman from Little Rock on the way to Fort Smith that night. Nothing like Razorback fans. Story 5. The Server. After a few stops in Texas, John O. decided it was time to go home. There was a spot in the family business, so he loaded up his Studebaker car and headed into his beloved Harrison. And look who he brought with him, a beauty queen from the university. I'd say he sure had a good set of eyes back then. They wanted to raise a family, build a business, and serve their community. In the mid-70s, he got a call from that horn player in the band. "John O., this is Governor Bumpers, and I understand you good people of Boone County want to start a college. I'd sure feel better if you'd serve on the board of trustees." Well, who says no to the governor? He was unanimously voted chairman of the 9-member board of trustees. Their first order of business was to hire the very first president. The long list of candidates came down to 2 men, one from Chicago and the other from Searcy County. A robust discussion was engaged, and it became apparent the vote would be split 50-50. Chairman John O. said, "This is just one more reason to never be voted chairman. We will officially vote next week." Well, the campaign began. The story goes one fellow trustee, clearly for Chicago, was seen leaving John O.'s office early one morning. Another trustee, clearly for Searcy County, heard about it at coffee on the square. He ran through the parking lots and alleys to John O.'s office, holding his cowboy hat to his head. We all know who that was. John O. had the same message for each of them. "I'm voting for the best man for our community, no matter where they are from." 1 week later, the vote was taken. Chairman Campbell announced our first president of our college is Dr. Bill Baker. That turned out well. From airman to chairman, John O. Campbell led a remarkable life for 96 years. When asked what was his greatest accomplishment, he said, "Well, that's easy. Melissa, Kevin, Craig, Kirk, and Brad, always considered his 4th son. They are the crown jewels of my life."